All right, well, I'm going to get started. Hopefully everyone has had a great day. Um, my name is William Scholes. I started in the dental industry back in 2002. Worked with Patterson Dental for a decade. I started up in northern New Jersey. That's where I used to live. And I did the day-to-day dental supply sales. Then I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, moved up into a role of office equipment and dental office design. After that, I got with a national company called US Transitions. US Transitions, I had a mentor there named Pete Newcomb who owned the company, and he taught me the ins and outs of the dental office practice sales. And then after about 3 or 4 years, I started my own business, hung my shingle. Been doing that since 2012. It's very blessed, happy, love what I do, love helping people, buyers and sellers. I'm going to roll into understanding associateships. Now, there's 2 ways you can go. You can go corporate dentistry or sole practitioner. The pros of a corporate opportunity for a prosthodontist: you generally get a good starting salary. You also have good, there's a lot of patients that roll through corporate practices, even in prosthodontists. I know they have things like Clear Choice and such that really primarily focus on reconstruction and so on and so forth. You get a ton of volume, and you'll see a very wide variety of patients. So, quite frankly, for some, what's great is you get to clock in and clock out. But what I've seen is some of the cons or the issues that I've heard from people that get into corporate dentistry as an associate is they do cap you. They are all about making money. Having said that, it's kind of like, they don't want all their eggs in one basket, so they keep filling associates, and you're just a number at the end of the day. And you can get too comfortable. And for some, like I said, having no autonomy can be an issue over time. And the type of dentistry can be limited. Again, they're dollar driven, and if you want to do a certain type of procedure or prosthodontic procedures, there's things that you want to grow into. A lot of times you're handcuffed. The sole practitioner associateship. Now, this first thing here, the pros are learning from a mentor. I can tell you that I would not be where I am right now if I did not. I purposely looked for a company once I left Patterson, a small company, sole proprietorship that had an owner that I could trust and learn from and mentor me. And that was a great move by myself. I honestly took a sacrifice a little bit in salary and income on the short term, but in the long term, it paid off tremendously. And to this day, we're actually still great friends. We bounce ideas off each other, and it's been a great relationship. So if you can find that, you will find that in a sole practitioner and not in corporate. So that is massive. You'll learn more about the business when you get involved with sole proprietors. Typically, they're going to open up a little bit how the business is run, and you'll see it firsthand. It's pretty interesting, and it's a great learning experience. You'll see a defined patient base. Typically, in a prostho practice, it's mostly referral driven, and if it's referral driven, you're going to see patients that are either they come knowing that you are highly regarded and you're respected and so on and so forth. And that's kind of like my business model, quite frankly. It is my business model. 90% of my listings do come from referrals. And it's great to have them say, hey, John said you did a great job for them, and could you do the same for me? And I say, we'll do everything we can for you. So we have a whole different standard of care ourselves. And as working in a sole proprietorship, you will see that same thing. Hold on one second. You'll have a higher quality of care, like I said. I mean, you know, typically in the sole proprietorship, if somebody has a crown that pops off, a restoration that was just completed, and 2 months later, in a sole proprietorship, it's not even a question. You know, you're gonna take care of that typically. Whereas in corporate, they may require that patient to pay for that redo, and quite frankly, that I don't know how people feel, but myself, I'd be quite uncomfortable doing that. Some of the cons, possibly not enough work to be done. I'll get into this, but when you get into an associateship, it's very important to do your research and find out what type of patient flow they have. Do they have enough room for you? And I'll get into that a little bit more. And typically there's an assumed buyout. There's a little handshake in the beginning. Hey, eventually I might sell it to you. But that is failure. In fact, dental economics says, I think it's 88% of the dental practice buy-ins end up failing. And I'm going to get into that a little bit in the next couple slides of why. And you might take a lower starting salary. Again, it depends on your value system. I personally was willing to take lower salary to learn more so that in the future I'd be in a better position. And if that's in your value system, then that might be your best scenario for an associateship. One of the main pitfalls to avoid is a non-compete and understanding what that radius looks like. I always tell people, don't sign up where you want to work or live, in the future if this job doesn't work out. Because typically it's 5 to 10 miles, sometimes depends on rural or urban areas, you might have a larger distance of non-compete. But either way, I find getting calls from these people that like, oh, I'd love to buy that practice. And I'm like, hey, do you have a non-compete? And then, yeah, we have a non-compete. And I said, well, we just did the mileage radius and, unfortunately you can't get it. So be real cautious of that when you're picking your associateship, if that's the way to go. This is why typically these associate to buy-ins fail. There's a common misconception that the associate, that their role is to basically just alleviate demand, meaning, I want to take an extra day off a week, so I'm going to bring an associate in. Unfortunately, what happens is there's not enough work for that associate. And within a very short period of time, that associate realizes it. And, it becomes a situation where you don't want to, basically they leave, so you got to be cautious when you're picking that opportunity as an associate and make sure they're doing it for the right reasons. Typically what you want to do is you want to make sure that their schedule is booked 3 to 5 months out as a doctor. Then there's plenty of room for somebody to come in. Also physical space. You're going to be given 1 room or 2 rooms, or, how are you going to be working? So you got to look into those kind of things. And it's, in my opinion, that's why having a third party look at these scenarios, if they're good, like we do, we're going to look at all these different scenarios and make sure that it makes sense for both parties. Rather than just everybody's happy, I need a job, you need some help, let's do this. So you got to be really cautious with all that stuff. And again, this is why typically these scenarios fail. And a lot of times the owner is just unwilling to leave. He just decides, I like it too much now that I have this extra time. So discussing what a buy-in versus a buyout is for a dental transition, okay? So a dental practice buy-in is very complicated. There was a period, I'd say over 20 years ago, the typical associate buy-in, it was very standard. People would come in, they would shake hands and talk a little bit, get to know each other, and I like him or I like her, and so on and so forth. And they'd start working, and then after a period of time, hey, I'm going to be selling in a couple of years. You want to buy it? Sure. And it actually worked. Well, obviously that like I said previously, that is got failure written all over it nowadays. It's we live in too much of a litigious society, and student debt and cost of practices and financing. It gets very complicated. So after, the first step into where we currently are was a buy-in. There was a period of time where companies like Mercer Consulting and AFCO were really pushing the dental buy-in, which was a fragmented period of purchasing where you would purchase for 20% maybe over a 5-year period and eventually buy them out. Now, the problem with that is it is very contract intense. You need a shareholder agreement, you need a limited partnership agreement. The two separate entities. Sorry, somebody jumped in. There's two separate entities that tend to, it gets real sticky. That's all I got to say. There's an income allocation issue. If you have one doctor producing, 600K and one producing 300K, and then you're splitting a percentage of the profits, depending on your ownership percentage, it can get very sticky, and actually it can cause some issues. Believe it or not, there's also real estate issues. If the owner owns the real estate, that buyer progressively is paying off the mortgage with a portion of their share of income from the profit of their ownership. So basically, those situations got very sticky, and so over the last 6 or 7 years, we've seen the shift into that, clean 0 to 100%, right? So buyer comes in day one, buys the entire entity. It's a lot cleaner. The seller now acts as the associate, and there's no better way to do a transition than to have that glue, to have that doctor that will be there to not only mentor but assist in the transition in any way necessary. And sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. It really depends on the buyer and the seller, and we work through that. So that's the titles are clear, and it's clean and easy. So startup. Should I buy an existing practice or start my own? My previous role of being in equipment and office design, I did a lot of startups. And quite frankly, what I realized is I kind of got uncomfortable, having these guys and gals spend, $400,000 or $500,000 to start up an office with zero cash flow. So, when you buy a practice, you're buying cash flow. And I'll get into it. I'll explain. I'm going to go through an entire valuation model and kind of show you. You also get conditioned patients. These people are used to coming there. They're regular. They're not flip-floppers. There's less than 2% failure rate. It's a low risk to buy a practice. That's why dental lenders are willing to spend or offer 100% financing, and we do that for pretty much every deal we do. Again, it's got to be priced right, and the cash flow's got to be right, and the buyer's got to be right. But there are cons, obviously, if it's the wrong fit. If a lot of times I see this in the for sale by owners when they do it themselves, it can really blow up. So we focus and take pride on making sure that the fit philosophically makes sense at first. That's got to be everything. Beyond that, we can work through the numbers. That's fine. But that philosophical match has to be there. And there are some pressures of ownership. Let's be honest. I mean, if you've never done it, there's a reason you make that ownership profit, because you've got to manage staff. You've got to learn about, the employment law and all that stuff. And, we surround our buyers with all the necessary needs, whether it be the right CPA or payroll company or whatnot. We offer options for them so that they are in a good place. So scratch start, the positives, you can build the practice any way you want, right? You can go in, you can, set the room up the right way you want. You can buy the right equipment that exactly fits your needs, and so on and so forth. It could be in the location you want. You can hire the staff, and so on and so forth. but that's really where it ends. I mean, there's a lot of risk in startups, even in specialties. I mean, you know, yes, you want to find, if you found a place where there's no prosthodontist for 50 miles and, you know, there's you know, 24 GP practices in that same area, you're probably going to do okay. You know, obviously you got to have a personality, got to get out there and meet people and start working those referrals. But it is very high risk because you're not going to find an area like that, more or less. And there's a big cash investment with no cash flow. You know, I talk to guys who've done it or gals, and I'll tell you right now, that first month when there's no money coming in and you've got to make payments and you got to make staff payroll, that's hard. And it happens. And it takes about 3 to 6 months to really ramp up. So I'm going to jump onto my financial software here, and I'm going to show you what we do. And I'm going to hopefully educate you folks on evaluating or what to look for when evaluating or analyzing a practice that you might buy. Excuse me. So this is an actual practice we currently have for sale. I'm using it as an example, so I'm going to start here. I'm going to look, I'm a bit of a financial nerd, so we've developed our own software based on years of working with different advisors and analysts, and using their software, we developed our own. And it breaks down, at the top, you're going to see breaking down the actual collections from doctor, and if there's a hygiene program in the prostho practice or an associate, we can break it out by each individual production. In this case, it's just solo doctor, okay? Solo prosthodontist. I'm going to show you 2019. It's the last full fiscal year we have, and I'm going to go through some of the numbers here and explain, hopefully, you all get some good concept of what to look for, not only on a profit and loss statement, but even tax returns. So all this data is directly off the tax return. Top line is the collected gross, and it's collections, not production. And below is the expense columns, right? So you see these greens and reds here. So what we do, we developed, you know, an analysis that'll tell us, you know, based on national averages of each expense column, are you ahead, are you behind? And I could literally just kind of blink at the screen real quick and say, this is a healthy practice. And this practice, in fact, is one of the best ones I've ever been able to list from a, you know, an analytical standpoint. You know, you see very little red. The only red is here on rent. And one of the reasons that is in this case is because this owner also owns the real estate. And it's very, you know, one of the benefits of owning a practice, one of the many is taxes, and being able to take advantage of the way the tax code is written. And, you know, you basically can pay yourself or pay the rent, you know, within reason, a little higher than, you know, market value, in order to offset some of the employment payroll cost, because you are an employee typically of your own business. So you see two columns here each year. One is sellers, one is adjusted. So what we do is we look at all these expenses. You know, we look at lab, we look at clinical supplies, and then we look at things like, I'm going to jump over to a page here. These are the adjusted page. This means that there's certain expenses in a practice that would not transfer to a buyer. In this case, this doctor employs his wife as a bookkeeper and pays about $34,000. That's fine, perfectly legal. But is the buyer going to hire a $34,000 bookkeeper? No. So we add that back to profit. Now, the other major adjustment that we make is with salary. So typically in a practice, when you own your own business, you're going to kind of pay yourself what you feel is appropriate to a certain degree. It's got to be reasonable for the IRS. But what we notice and what we like to do is normalize that salary to somewhere between 30 and 35% of what the doctor is collecting. And what that does is it gives us a clean number for EBITDA, or entrepreneurial profit. And I will get into that in a little bit more detail to hopefully educate everybody here on what that means. So basically, in this case, this doctor in 2019 paid themselves $211,000 and change, and we adjusted their income up. We said, no, you should have paid yourself $330,000, right? And so what that does, it doesn't change the bottom line at all, but it changed the ratio of salaries and extra profit or entrepreneurial profit. And that's what we want to look for. That's what you all want to look for when you're looking at P&Ls. You want to see, because we're buying cash flow, right? We want to see how much money is left over. Let's assume we're an associate in this practice. How much is left over, right? And so that's what EBITDA is. And you'll see this line here. So in 2019, the EBITDA was roughly 28% after adjustments, okay? That is very good. In fact, the typical average is anywhere from 12 to 15%. So it's more than double, close to more than double what the average EBITDA is. So that's the amount of money that you're making as an owner. That's the owner profit. That's the difference between what you do when what you produce and collect and get paid on versus all the other work you do. And so what we do is we look at, from a profit center, we look at EBITDA, we talked about that, and then we look at total operating income. So that is basically the bottom line number that you take home as the owner of this practice, assuming you've collected the same amount and the expenses haven't changed. So in this case, you're talking about $633,000. So well over 60% of the profit is of the collections is actually going in your pocket. This is a tremendous opportunity, in any state of the mind. Most practices are typically around 45 to 50%. So I'm going to switch now over to our synthesis. This is how we kind of break down and find out what the price should be for the market. Okay, so there's three ways to look at it. You've got the percentage of collections. Typically in Virginia, the prostho practices sell roughly around 68%. Then you look at multiple of EBITDA, which is typically about 4 times. And then you look at multiple of total operating income, which is anywhere from 2 to 2.5 times is the average where a practice will sell. Okay, so in this case, you see these numbers, total operating income in the last full year in 2019 was $633. You multiply it by 2. You add the premiums and discounts, and I'll get into that quickly. And you're looking at $1.2 million value on this practice. Now, you got to scale it back from that number because that's what it's truly worth, from a cash flow standpoint. But we also have market. We got to understand the market. We got to understand that, what are banks willing to lend? What are buyers willing to spend? So we've got to pull it back a little bit on this and take into consideration the percentage of collections. And again, there's 5 factors we use to identify outside of the numbers what the value should be. Location, the age, the quality of the equipment, the practice stability, growth prospects, and transferability. So, 5 is average. 1 point above 5 is a 1% premium. 1 point below is a discount. This current practice that I'm analyzing and showing you, I'm very conservative in these numbers because, quite frankly, they are arbitrary. My point of view may be different from others, so I try to be as conservative as I can be. So this practice is currently priced at $901,000. Now here's the factors that we want to look at to see if we're in line. That's 82% of last year's collections. And, typically that seems like a little high. But then you start looking at the price to EBITDA. And you say, wow, if the average is 4, we're at under 3 here. And then you look at price to total operating income, and it's less than 2%. It's actually less than 1.5. And again, your typical practice is going to sell from 2 to 2.5. So, there's a lot of pulling factors. This practice is actually a great opportunity. So I'm going to go through quickly a pro forma to show you how you pay for something like this. So, 2020, obviously we had COVID. We had 2 months of shutdown. So this practice is trending almost back to $1 million. They're typically at 1.1. Okay, so they're actually in great shape. But with 2 months off, obviously that number came down a bit. But the way banks are looking at things and the way we're analyzing things is we've accepted there's 2 months of shutdown, and we're looking at the other 10 months to see if they rebound. And this practice has done very well. And in fact, so we're basically saying, look, year one, buyer's going to come in, and they're going to do just what the seller did in 19, 18, 17, and 16. 1.1, very steady. This is a very consistent practice. So at that point, that means that the owner doctor pays himself $340,000, right? Now we got all the expenses here, right? We've accounted for increase in consumer price index, so we're up 2% on our expenses. We still have an EBITDA of over $400,000. Now we have to pay for this, right? We've got the loan, right? And so this goes back to some of the seminars I've done for students where they ask me how much does a practice cost, and I say nothing, and they're like, come on. I said, no, it doesn't. It's the cash flow should pay for that loan. And the question is, how much do I have left? Okay. And so in this case, we do a loan schedule on $900,000. The current rate is actually almost 3%, but I'm conservative. So I'm going to say it's 4% over a 10-year period, 12 payments. You're looking at about $9,000 a month, about $109,000 a year in payments and cost for this opportunity. Now we go back to our pro forma and we say, okay, so we had 400,000 EBITDA, and then we take the principal, amortization and depreciation. So we take all our loan payments out, and we're left with 297,000 in profit. Now we add that 297 to our 341 that we paid ourselves. And year one, that buyer should be making over $600,000, almost $640,000 on this practice with no growth, zero growth, after paying the debt, right? So I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint and kind of go through a couple things called KPIs, which is the other factors to look at when you're analyzing a practice and looking at buying a practice. So it's pretty self-explanatory. This is our brochure, by the way. Everybody has different whatever, but the KPIs should be all the same. This talks about how the payments are coming in, the total number of patients. You see stability here. You see 204. On this one, you're seeing the production, right? And this is important. What procedures is a doctor doing? And you want to match, when you're buying a practice, you want to try to match those the procedures that you do or like to do with what the current practice is doing. You also want to see where I can grow. In this practice, quite frankly, the growth comes in hygiene, where there's zero hygiene. And not every prosthodontic practice has to have hygiene, but it's nice to have hygienists maybe one or 2 days a week, have them take care of the patients that nobody wants, quite frankly. But if you're a fee-for-service prosto and you're paying your hygienist, $40,000 a year to come in 2 days a week, and she's collecting over $100,000, think about how much you're making. It's worth it. So there's a growth opportunity in this practice. But you want to look for those opportunities. In this case, again, you're looking at, hold on one second. Let me reduce this. In this case, you're looking at the payer mix is 100% fee for service in this practice. In a lot of the practices, prostho practices, unless they are, which is ideal. You don't have to deal with insurance if you're doing large procedures, and you're taking extra special care of these patients. This accounts receivable is great, but you want to look at receivables. Typically, you're going to see about, on $1 million practice, you're going to see the current somewhere around 50 to 60, and you want to look at the 30, 60, 90 days and make sure that they're not large. In this case, this doctor is taking most of this cash up front, it looks like. So there's zero issues with the receivables. We show fee schedules. You want to take a look and make sure that the fee schedule matches what you believe, quite frankly, you're worth. So I'm quickly going to show you here. On the right, you're going to see our brochure. It's 17 pages. And whatever practice you're buying, you should get all the data and make sure it's collected and done right. On the left, I'm just showing you our website. If you ever want to look at any of our brochures, they're actually online. It shows you, you just go to Commonwealth Transitions, click on hover over buyer practice, and then click on register as a buyer, fill out the form, and you get a password, and you can go in and you can review all this information. I'm also always available to do this one-on-one with anybody interested in any of our opportunities. And quite frankly, we do it with every buyer. I want to make sure that buyers are comfortable with what they have in front of them, what they're buying or what they're looking at. I want to touch on location versus profitability. Buyers have to identify what their value system is, what type of dentistry they want to do. What I find with the demographic search is, quite frankly, the larger the geographic region, with a main focus on the opportunity, the practice opportunity, is the best way to find what you're looking for. If you try to narrow your search to such a small geographic region, the odds of you getting what you want in a practice are that much smaller. You know, one of the things I want to touch on that I see a lot of, you know, in Virginia, there's 3 typical sections in this state. You've got the urban DC suburbs of Northern Virginia. You've got central Southwest Virginia, you know, the Charlottesvilles and the Lynchburg, Roanoke, Harrisonburg region, greater Shenandoah Valley, which is where I live. And then you have the Eastern Shore, which is military and the beach, Virginia Beach, and all that stuff. And they're 3 very slightly different regions for owning a business. You're going to see more competition and higher expected salaries and rents in that Northern Virginia market. Hence, you're going to see lower profitability in your business. And if that, you know, to each their own, but you got to expect that. There's a lot more turnover. And like I said, rents are typically 10% of collections, whereas in the rest of the state, you're probably looking at about 5% of the mortgage/rent. It should be typically where your range should be. And you're going to see less competition in that central, you know, Southwest region, and also potentially down by the Eastern Shore. So these are things to consider when you're really doing that thought of value system in yourself of what's going to work for you. I'm gonna end this with a couple tips, and this comes from experience over the years of selling prosto practices. In fact, one of my favorite guys, Dr. John Rose, Junie, I sold his practice several years ago, and he's a prosthodontist, and he ended up coming to work for me part-time, and he's having fun doing it, and I love to work with him. But I've learned a lot from that sale and working with him. And, you know, we've identified a couple things in a transition for a prosthodontist that really makes sense, that makes it a win-win, which is what we're going for and what you should be looking for as a buyer. You should definitely make sure that, you know, one of these scenarios happens. Either the seller can stay for 6 months. If there's enough production for 2 doctors and room, then have them stay and work, even if it's 1 extra day a week. Or the buyer and seller work out a transition where the seller definitely takes the buyer out to lunch to meet all the referral sources and introduce them around the area, and really just endorse them to everybody that the seller has been working with for, you know, over the years. And also just be available as a mentor, whether that's on the phone or you know, to come in and look at a case and work together on something occasionally. I think that's really important. And so, you know, whether it's B and C or A and C or a combination of A, B, and C, these are some main factors we've identified that really helps make a transition successful for prosthodontists. So that's it. You know, I want to keep it short and sweet. I'm available one-on-one anytime to go through whether it's this practice. If anybody on the Zoom meeting is interested in looking at this in more detail, I'll be happy to show it, or any other practice we have, or also we do buyer representation. So if you have you've identified a practice that you want some help on, we do the same analysis, and we go through it, and we help to make sure that you're successful. So I just want to say thank you, everybody who joined us. We're going to be recording it, posting on the website. If you missed anything, you have my contact information right here. Thanks again, and have a wonderful night.